This is what it's like every day in Aleppo.
الطفل عمران دقنيش
Social media users are sharing the image.
He's the boy who's come to symbolize the tragic plight of children in this war-torn country.
This image of him has gone viral as it captures the price children are paying. This is a boy who is younger than the war itself.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. Here are some of the media stories we're covering this week. War imagery, the pictures that resonate versus the ones that do not. We go to Ecuador 3 years after the government passed a media law there to see how things have changed. Pakistan, and the protest over a lack of news coverage turns violent and gets plenty of coverage. And thank you, Mr. Trump. It's been emotional. There is no shortage of disturbing images from the war in Syria. Fresh pictures land on editors' news desks every day, but relatively few of them reach you because editors often deem them too graphic to publish or broadcast. That is one of the ways in which the real story, the human cost of war, gets buried. Last week, the video of a 5-year-old boy, Omran Daqneesh, injured in a bombing in Aleppo, made news around the world. The image did not show death, but it managed to capture in the boy's face the shock and the suffering of a city in which so many civilians find themselves trapped. Like Alan Kurdi last year, lifeless on that Turkish beach, these images offer an immediate, visceral connection from the story out to the world. The issues arise in the way that the pictures are used. This latest one showed a victim injured, it is alleged, in a Syrian or a Russian airstrike on the eastern side of the city, prompting pro-government media activists to publish photographs of children injured in rebel attacks on the government-held western side of the city. Like the children involved, images have a way of losing their innocence in a propaganda war. We were slightly torn about whether to lead with this story. The bombing happened 10 days ago. We're a bit late getting to it. But the timeline here, the life cycle of an image, how quickly that image can lose its ability to resonate with audiences is a big part of this story, which is why our starting point this week is Aleppo.
It's the way he looks at us. It's in his eyes. He is questioning us. He's interrogating us. He's like saying, and then what? And when you look at his eyes, it's absolutely perfect. I mean, the moment is absolutely perfect. I feel like he's questioning the whole world, saying, look what you did to me, and what's next?
There was nothing exceptional about the story behind the image, more bombs landing in Aleppo. For the man behind the camera, media activist and photographer Mahmoud Raslan, what set the video footage of Omran Daqneesh apart was what we did not hear. With the still image, what we did not see.
In Aleppo, we are taking thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of pictures. Omran's is just one of many cases unfolding during the shelling by Assad's regime and the Russian Air Force. He was unique because he's the only child who came out silent, the only one who didn't speak or cry or scream.
That sort of footage instinctively provokes the feeling or the need to protect that little boy. And this is, I think, what so many people around the world of very, very different political persuasions and very, very different stances on the Syrian war reacted to.
In a modern-day battlefield like Syria, with so many people equipped with phone cameras, the images come fast and frequently. Only a few of them register with audiences and travel as far as these did. The images of Omran Daqneesh connected with people, provoking a collective emotional response. Where they fell short, what no image can really provide is the context, the understanding.
One of the things that it doesn't tell you anything about, and really I think no image can, is what's going on in Aleppo. Aleppo is a divided city. Part of it is rebel-held, part of it is Assad-held. The Assad-held part is in a very, very, very different condition than the rebel-held part, etc. So like all things in the Syrian war, even where this image was taken is enormously complicated politically. And of course, the image doesn't show us that. What it shows us is a little wounded, bewildered boy sitting in an ambulance.
The picture doesn't show us the worst of what war has to offer. You do connect with the child, but he is removed from the scene. He is in a sort of a rather sterile environment, and so what we don't see, and what the picture doesn't show, is just the absolute carnage that occurs, on a daily basis in all over Syria, but specifically in Aleppo. It is compelling, but it doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of what these people are going through.
The first rule of journalism, whether you're a reporter in the field or a news consumer, is consider the source. After his pictures went viral, it emerged that Mahmoud Raslan had previously posted images of himself alongside militant rebels later accused of beheading a 13-year-old Palestinian boy captured from a rival faction. He has also posted messages praising rebel fighters, including suicide bombers, for which he is now having to answer.
I'm in an area that has been liberated, and all of us here are rebels trying to restore freedom and basic rights. I always tweet praising suicide bombers, because the martyr is sacrificing himself to break the siege and open up safe passages for civilians.
I've been covering this conflict from its very beginning. I have come very greatly disillusioned about our profession because of what I saw happening in Syria, especially after the very questionable story of the man behind this photograph emerged, taking selfies with the group that beheaded another child a couple of weeks ago, and that I think has really called into question the indignation that we have seen.
That's one thing the Syria story does not lack: indignation.
We shed tears, but there are no tears here.
But that seems to be where the story always ends. And for all the confusing factional politics, the geopolitical complexities, the overlapping national interests, part of the blame lies with news consumers, people who share because they care for a while.
The photograph of the boy that drowned off the coast of Turkey, the Aylan Kurdi image, had a very similar life on the internet. But today's society is just, our attention spans are so fractured that it raises awareness and people move on to something else very quickly. So sharing something on the internet between people is quite powerful, and it does raise awareness, but it does have limits in terms of that being turned into action.
In all honesty, I can't see this image leading to any sort of political change. And I am totally in favor of photographs like this being shown, published, circulated. I mean, if people are made uncomfortable, my reaction is good. There's a lot of things in the world that should make you uncomfortable. And I do think that we need to look at these photographs and ponder them and go deeper than them. But I think that this photograph is also a very, very good example of the limits of photography.
As we say in our profession, a picture has never stopped war. It's like the social networks or the media needed something new on Syria after Aylan. So that came like on the right time. I'm sure it's going to be forgotten, unfortunately. It's going to end up in a book or in a database, and then we're going to talk about it in the history of photojournalism or war photography, and we're going to pass on something else.
On the download now, our viewers on the power of war photography.
We're often very quick to call widely circulated shocking images iconic, but wide circulation and iconicity are not really the same thing. An iconic image is one that's seen to symbolise something much bigger than the event shown in the photograph itself. And so while this photograph may be iconic, my question would be, well, what is it iconic of? And I think one of the reasons that it's resonated so strongly is that it's actually iconic of the way in which we've collectively failed people like the boy in this photograph. And I think the mismatch between the institutional response to the crisis and the public outcry generated by this image and others that came before it, unfortunately makes me very sceptical of the potential that an image like this has.
There are, of course, conflicts in Iraq and Yemen that have not had such iconic images like that of Omran or Aylan, and they've not touched the world in the same way that these two boys have. Allowing Omran to become yet another horrific symbol of this war is not voyeurism in the same way that other conflicts have had their images, but it's a depressing point that for some, motivation and realization of such horror only comes from seeing this face, not all the others.
Other media stories that are on our radar this week. The Mexican state of Veracruz has become one of the most lethal places on earth to be a journalist. On August 22nd, reporter Lucia Lopez Castillo was wounded in a shooting that took place in front of her home in Poza Rica. Lopez Castillo writes for a local newspaper, El Cuarto Poder, but is said to have steered clear of politically sensitive topics in her work. Noe Zavaleta has not. The Veracruz correspondent for Proceso magazine was forced to flee the state after the publication of his book, which alleges widespread corruption under the current state governor, Javier Duarte. Veracruz is on a drug smuggling route and is known as a so-called narco state. Many there accuse Governor Duarte of fostering a climate of impunity for crimes against journalists and implying links between reporters and the drug gangs that they cover. Media outlets in Pakistan's biggest city, Karachi, have been caught up in a dispute between one of the country's largest political parties, the MQM, and the government. MQM protesters stormed the offices of the Ari News channel this past week and assaulted media workers there. The protesters had been urged by their party leaders to gather outside several news outlets to protest their failures to provide due media coverage of the party's activities. Some MQM members have been on a hunger strike outside the Karachi Press Club, protesting what they call atrocities and injustices committed by the army against party workers on the pretext of anti-terror operations. Some in Pakistan argue that the army, which has historically wielded considerable power, aims to break up political parties considered too big of a threat to the military and its influence. Senior MQM leader Farooq Sattar expressed regret over the media assault. The whistleblowing website WikiLeaks has come under criticism for failing to redact sensitive information in some of its past releases, revealing personal data of hundreds of ordinary citizens. An Associated Press investigation revealed that in the past year alone, the organization published sensitive medical, financial, and identity details throughout 500,000 files obtained from the U.S. Democratic National Committee, Turkey's ruling AKP party, and Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry. In the Saudi cables, WikiLeaks exposed teenage rape victims, HIV and hepatitis patients, and, in a particularly sensitive case disputed by WikiLeaks, published the name of a Saudi citizen arrested for being gay, which is a crime punishable by death in that country. The U.S. DNC cables leaked in July contained more than 24 Social Security and credit card numbers, including presidential candidate Hillary Clinton's contact details. WikiLeaks responded to the AP investigation via Twitter, calling the report ridiculous and saying it was just a rerun of a story that AP had previously put out last year. When Ecuador's president, Rafael Correa, was voted into power in 2007, his government wanted to reconfigure the media landscape there. It passed a communications law written to diminish the power of private media, traditionally owned by the right-wing business class, which opposes leftist leaders like Correa, and to increase the space for public and community broadcasting. When the global news media have covered this story, which is not often, they have highlighted Correa's public attacks on private media and accused him of authoritarianism. But for many Ecuadorians, that image doesn't tell the full story. They see the private media representing the country's privileged elite, and many of those who voted Correa in twice now point to the stories of this government that have gone uncovered: the social policies, free health care, education, historic rises in pensions, and corresponding drops in poverty. They say the media law has leveled an uneven playing field, that it lays the groundwork for Ecuador's first public broadcasting system, one that includes voices that privately owned mainstream news media have traditionally left out. The Listening Post's Marcela Pizarro now from Quito, 3 years after the media law was passed, on the government's multifaceted media strategy and its impact on society.
Switch on the TV in Ecuador on a Saturday morning. Tune into Enlace Ciudadano, Citizens Link, brought to you by the nation's president cum presenter, Rafael Correa. Correa spends his weekends traveling to the country's most remote towns for a 4-hour political roadshow, doing what he says the mainstream media fails to, reporting on his government's achievements. Though it may look kitsch, it's a masterstroke in political communications.
Ya, como dije antes, él explica todo su trabajo que ha hecho, ¿no?
Ha habido una revolución, o sea, nada que ver con el país que encontramos.
A ningún gobierno le ha convenido dar reeducación a su pueblo y peor salud. ¿Para qué? Para mantenernos en la ignorancia. Los medios de comunicación siempre han sido oposición y siempre han sido poder en el país. Cuando han querido votar un presidente, han votado. Así de fácil.
Hay quien dice que es un espacio propagandístico y sí.
Some would call it propaganda. That's because it is. It's a space for self-promotion. It's a totally different communication strategy from other Ecuadorian presidents, who always used to go through spokesmen.
Cómo hay periodistas que en vez de periodistas son buitres, buscando carroña, ¿no? Buscando cómo hacer daño.
Este gobierno es un gobierno...
This government is directed by PR people, and the rationale behind their communication strategy comes from advertising. They have set up a propaganda system, and the president fits perfectly well within this scheme. He has consolidated himself as the man who owns the narrative.
Capacidad de expresarse.
Rafael Correa, para bien o para mal, les guste o no les guste.
Like it or not, Rafael Correa is a phenomenon in the field of communication. He's succeeded in permeating the national consciousness. If he wasn't charismatic, didactic, he may have bored everyone, and it wouldn't have worked. It's happened with leaders before. The only problem is that in this system, the strategy relies too heavily on him and no one else.
La ausencia de él podría agotarse esa forma de comunicar.
The format may seem familiar. Remember Venezuelan President Hugo Chávez's 6-hour TV marathons? Like Chávez, Correa has waged an open battle with the country's right-wing private media.
Cuánta irresponsabilidad estos politiqueros frustrados disfrazados de periodistas.
When it comes to media reform, Ecuador has also looked south to Argentina for inspiration. During her time in power, Cristina Kirchner pushed through a law that aimed to demonopolize the media, to dilute the power of big private networks. In 2013, Ecuador passed its own communications law, La Ley Orgánica de la Comunicación, whose key provisions were for a media watchdog to regulate newspaper and TV content, and splicing the media market into 3 equal parts: private, state, and community-controlled.
One of the great struggles of the Ecuadorian people, indigenous people, Afro-Ecuadorians, students, journalists in general, has been the issue of democratizing the media. So one of the great successes here is that this law calls for equity in the market. Why is this important? Because in Ecuador there was always a monopoly on truth. The narrative always came from just one type of media.
Digamos, un paisaje mediático, ya que lo dices.
Private media used to dominate the landscape. Broadcasting was divided unequally. 92 to 93% of it belonged to private mass media. We had no public media, and the few public outlets that did exist just disappeared due to lack of funds. And community outlets didn't even amount to 1%.
Denominados comunitarios no llegaban al 1%.
En este país nacieron primero los medios privados.
In this country and all over Latin America, private media preceded public media. It's not like European countries where public media came first. Here, private media have always been able to control public opinion, and they have always echoed the interests of media owners. This has also prevented the development of other forms of media.
Pidieron el desarrollo de nuevos medios.
The government has built its own media apparatus. To level out private media dominance, it now runs 5 TV channels, 4 radio stations, 2 newspapers, and 4 magazines. And this year, community and indigenous media were invited to tender for licenses on over 1,400 frequencies. A media policy milestone for many, although some skeptics say outlets critical of the government are unlikely to be awarded licenses. The other part of the law that's come under fire is the creation of the media watchdog Supercom, which has the power to impose fines and order media to issue public apologies on output it deems offensive.
La creación, el establecimiento de una superintendencia.
Supercom is controlled directly by the President of the Republic, by the executive branch, so it will always rule in favor of the state. After the law was passed, media outlets got scared. Journalists are self-censoring. They know their outlets could face fines, so they keep quiet or avoid subjects that might anger the government.
Especialmente espinosos para el gobierno.
Martín Payares was a journalist at El Comercio, one of the country's biggest right-wing dailies. He was fired last year for his outspoken tweets against the president. He says it's because the paper felt the heat from Supercom. That paper wasn't the only one. Javier Bonilla, pen name Bonil, is well known for his cartoons that take potshots at the government. Bonil and his paper El Universo, which has a history of expensive run-ins with Correa, most recently faced a $180,000 fine, and the paper was ordered to publish a correction on a cartoon deemed racist by the watchdog.
I was summoned
to Supercom, so I went there with two pencils, a giant fake one made of rubber and a normal one. The sanction was to correct the cartoon, right? Why? The argument was that the cartoon lied. But in cartoons, what we do is to exaggerate certain traits. The way to empower people, to democratize speech, is not by silencing others. And sadly, that's what's happening. Look at Argentina, Ecuador, Venezuela, Nicaragua. I mean, who is telling the truth? Is it just those who can make themselves heard?
For the past 10 years, countries around this region, countries like Ecuador, Venezuela, Bolivia, Argentina, have been trying to redraw their media maps. Venezuela's President Hugo Chavez, Bolivia's Evo Morales, the Kirchners from Argentina, and Rafael Correa in Ecuador have all fought very public battles against the private media. They've been called authoritarian, pariahs of press freedom by some. Others say they're trying to democratize the right to speech for everyone. These Latin American left-wing governments face an uncertain future, and so too does the media landscape they'd started to reshape. In Argentina, the new right-wing president, Mauricio Macri, has vowed to scrap Kirchner's media reform law. In Venezuela, socialism has lost its telegenic champion. Chavez is dead, and his Bolivarian revolution is no longer being televised. Rafael Correa, in his final year as president, would hope that his legacy, the media reforms he led, might better stand the test of time.
In Ecuador's polarized media landscape, community media outlets that operate outside the private media space can offer a real alternative to the mainstream. Here are some of them. The so-called radio schools have been covering stories outside of Quito in the Chimborazo province ever since 1962. They matter because they give indigenous communities platforms to have their voices heard. They broadcast in Spanish, Quechua, and other indigenous languages. A series of online sites has emerged from Quito in the past few years, offering debate and investigative journalism, often critical of the government. They include Focus, Mil Hojas, Plan V, and the Cuatro Pelagatos, which was founded by a group of journalists, including Martín Payares, who contributed to our piece. They also recently created a satirical tool, a digital app called Mashi Machine, that allows President Correa's speeches to be jumbled up so that mischievous users can mess with his message and then share their work on social media. Senor Correa is probably not amused. One of the ironies of Donald Trump's presidential campaign is his stated disdain for the news media. Many American political analysts blame the media for providing the oxygen for Trump's campaign when they gave him so much coverage during the early stages. Super Deluxe is a US-based production company that's taken Trump's complaints about the coverage, usually delivered via Twitter, and turned them into an emo song. Emo is a musical genre born back in the late 1980s. Its name is short for emotional hardcore. You might hear hints of bands like Green Day or Weezer in this tune, and you just knew that the producers of the video were going to have a little fun with Mr. Trump's hair. We'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.